Welcome to this video about the typeparam directive in Blazor. Why and where do we have to use it? Therefore, I'm going to create a new component. I give it the name of generic component. Now, because of the naming, you can see where the journey is going. Just for the sake of it, I am going to first trying to define a generic list without using the directive. I call it G's. Now the compiler comes in and says he doesn't know this generic type parameter. Therefore, I'm going to use the typeparam directive T. Now we can use T as normal. So because I've named the component generic component, you can see that we have to use this if we want to make a component reusable with different types. Therefore, I'm also going to create another parameter of type RenderFragment T. Now, RenderFragment, it's a part of markup that you can give to another component, and I just call it UI with T. Now, we are receiving a list of T's, and we are also receiving a piece of markup that expects a T as an input so that it can display it or whatever it wants to do with it. So I iterate over the T's. Now I am not only going to display the render fragment with the item in it, because here we wouldn't encapsulate enough logic, so that we can encapsulate here a bit of UI. I'm going to create a class, call it card. So I'm going to create a card with bootstrap, give it a width 350 pixel, display inline block, so that we don't have a new row for every card. Now, here I want that every card that we are displaying here has the same image. I have copied it here. The image also has to have a class, card image top. Now, here in the body, the card body, here we want to display the markup that the user has defined. And therefore I'm copying this render fragment up in here. So that's that for the generic component. Now let's go to the index. The index is responsible for calling this generic component. I will quickly create a list of ints. And I will also create a list of strings so that we can display the component twice, just with different types. So, generic component. Now, we have defined it as T's. Give it the ints. Okay, I've misspelled it. Now, here I can define the UI, so the render fragment. Now, I've declared it of type render fragment T, so it expects something of type T so that it can display this. Like, how can we receive this value? Therefore, we can say context and give it the name of number. Now, in here, we can work with this number. Just going to make H5 and then say card number and give the number in here. Now I'm doing it with the strings. Now you're giving it the list of strings. Call it a word. And to see that we can also enhance it a bit, I'm just going to give it also a alert of type info. So let's see. So first we are creating 10 of these cards with the int as a type, and then we are creating 3 with the string. And this thing here, because we are giving a render fragment to the component, we can configure it as we want to. Now just to recap it, I go to the generic component here. So the generic component receives a list of t. This list can have a generic type parameter in it because we say with typeparam t that we are giving the component the possibility to also define generic types in it. Then we iterate over this list. So yeah, that's here the iteration. And then because we have also received a render fragment of type t, that's markup that expects an instance of type t as an input. Then for every one of these t's, we can render the render fragment with the current value in it. Yeah, thank you very much for your attention.